Welcome to Fresh Ground Theology's The Weekend Cup. Order yourself a fresh cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and join us as we explore some of the most fascinating saints and figures from church history. When Drogo returned to Sebourg, the road had finished with him. For years, he had traveled as a pilgrim, walking through France and Italy, and according to tradition, making 9 separate journeys to Rome. But the miles had taken their toll. A severe hernia left him in constant pain. His body had become disfigured, and later accounts describe sores that made even ordinary human contact difficult. The shepherd could no longer follow a flock across the fields. The pilgrim could no longer walk the road. And so the people of Sebourg helped him enter an entirely different kind of life. Beside the village church, they constructed a small cell. This was not a prison, though it may have resembled one. Drogo entered it voluntarily, taking up a vocation that medieval Christians would have recognized as the life of an anchorite, or more simply, a recluse. An anchorite withdrew from ordinary society to devote his or her life to prayer. Unlike a hermit living in the wilderness, an anchorite was often enclosed within a small room attached to a church. The space became a dwelling, a chapel, and eventually a tomb. Once enclosed, the anchorite was not expected to leave. Drogo's cell reportedly had 2 small openings. One looked into the church, allowing him to hear the services, observe the altar, and receive communion. The other faced the outside world. Through it, food and water could be passed to him. Visitors could speak with him, asking for his prayers or seeking his counsel. This was the strange shape of Drogo's new existence. He had withdrawn from the world, yet the world could still come to his window. He had left public life, yet he remained close enough to hear the voices of his neighbors. He lived alone, but he was not entirely isolated. Later tradition says that Drogo remained inside the cell for approximately 40 years, perhaps as many as 45. If that number is accurate, he spent most of his life within a room barely large enough to contain him. His diet was as narrow as his surroundings. He survived principally on barley bread and water. Some accounts say he warmed the water before drinking it, giving rise to the theory that this brownish mixture might somehow explain his eventual patronage of coffee. If visitors brought Drogo better food or other gifts, he reportedly kept only what was necessary and gave the remainder to the poor. And so it was small, but charity still found its way through the window. The man behind the wall soon became part of the life of Sebourg. Villagers came to speak with him. The sick asked for prayer. The troubled sought advice. Those carrying grief may simply have wanted someone to listen. Drogo knew something about burdens that could not be seen. Since childhood, he had carried guilt over his mother's death and childbirth, despite having done nothing wrong. Now he carried an illness everyone could see. Pain had marked both his memory and his body, yet the accounts do not remember him as bitter. They describe him as patient, peaceful, and even cheerful. The man suffering inside the cell became a source of comfort to people living beyond it. Over the years, generations of villagers would have passed before his window. Children grew into adults, families celebrated marriages and mourned deaths. Harvests followed harvests. New voices replaced familiar ones in the church, while Drogo remained. The shepherd who had once been crossing the fields now inhabited only a few square feet of stone and timber. The pilgrim who had traveled across Europe now measured his world by the distance between his bed, the outer window, and the opening into the sanctuary. To an outside observer, his life might have appeared to become very small, but one day, everything around him erupted into fire. The exact date is uncertain. By then, Drogo had already spent many years in his cell beside the church. Sebourg's church, like many medieval buildings, contained enough timber to make fire a constant danger. Somewhere within the building, flames took hold. Smoke gathered beneath the roof. Fire climbed the wooden supports and spread through the church. Villagers rushed toward the building, trying to save what they could. Bells may have sounded the alarm as people carried water and pulled sacred objects from the path of the flames. Then someone remembered the man behind the wall. Drogo was still inside his cell. His neighbors called to him. They begged him to come out while there was still time. Whatever vow he had made, surely no one would condemn him for escaping a burning building, but Drogo refused to leave. According to the traditional account, he answered that he had entrusted himself to God and would remain faithful to his vow. Then he stayed inside his cell and prayed as the church burned around him. Smoke darkened the air. Beams cracked and collapsed. Flames consumed the building to which Drogo's chamber had been attached. The church through which he had heard prayers and song, scripture, and the celebration of the Eucharist was reduced to charred timber and ruin. For the people outside, there could have seemed little hope that the recluse had survived. And when the fire finally died and the villagers approached the ruins, they found Drogo's cell still standing. Inside, they found Drogo alive and unharmed. Later generations naturally remembered the biblical story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the three faithful men thrown into the furnace of Babylon, only to emerge without even the smell of fire upon them. For Sebourg, this was their furnace story. We cannot reconstruct every detail. We do not know where the fire began, how quickly it spread, or precisely which portion of the church was destroyed. But the central memory remained. The church burned, Drogo refused to break his enclosure, and the man behind the wall survived. It would have been an extraordinary moment for the village. For years, people had come to Drogo's window asking for his prayers, and now they have witnessed God preserve the one who had prayed for them. Once the danger passed, Drogo did not use the incident as an opportunity to reclaim his freedom. He remained in his cell. The church could be rebuilt, the damaged walls could be repaired, the villagers could resume the familiar patterns of worship and work, and once again, visitors came to the little opening beside the church. Drogo listened, Drogo prayed, gave away what he did not need, and time continued to pass. The fire had not released him from his promise, neither had pain, illness, loneliness, or age. He remained in the narrow room until the years finally weakened his body, already marked by suffering. For most of his life, Drogo had surrendered everything he could to the Lord. First, he surrendered his inheritance, then his home, then the shepherd's field, then the pilgrim's road. Finally, he surrendered the freedom to go anywhere at all. The man who had once been reported in two places at the same time chose to remain in one place for the rest of his life. And there, in the spring of 1186, or perhaps 1189, Drogo's long enclosure drew toward its end. But even in death, according to the people of Sebourg, Saint Drogo would prove remarkably difficult to move. Thank you for listening to Fresh Ground Theology's The Weekend Cup. Come back next time and listen as we continue to explore saints and figures from church history.